This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting-edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. It's Alexa Linton here, and you're on the Whole Horse Podcast. We're here tonight with a longtime friend of mine and fellow horse lover who is most recently becoming very passionate about a movement that we've all heard some things about, the Me Too movement. And in this case, it's a relationship with the horse industry. I am so excited to have you here, April, and to be able to chat about this, you know?
Definitely. I'm really excited to be here too. So
awesome. Yeah. I approached April a few months back and just with the idea, and she's been stealing herself up since then. And, you know, we've finally hit on a time here, which is great, and connected. I can't even think how long we've known each other. It's been probably about 13 years or something.
Crazy. At least, yeah. Like it feels like forever.
It feels like a while. So April was there when I was just starting my career in equine sport therapy, and we've been weaving through each other's lives ever since. And April, I'll let you tell a little bit of your story, as well as, like, you know, what got you motivated to talk about this subject, and a little bit about the article that got published in horse journals as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been working for Horse Community Journals, publisher of Canadian Horse Journal, for almost 6 years now, which is crazy, and have a huge amount of respect for my publisher and editor and the magazine itself. And I guess about 4 or 5 months ago, Kathy had decided to write a Me Too article in the horse industry. And of course, that's something that, as a survivor of sexual assault as a kid, I feel very passionate about. So I was really excited that it was something that our magazine was going to tackle, because it's definitely something that's very prevalent in the horse world, being that it's mostly dominated by women, and of course young girls too. So that article appeared in our March-April issue not too long ago, and it was really interesting to see. Of course, while we were writing it, we put a call out for input, and that reaction from people was very varied, but very interesting. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that it's a movement that's been around for long enough that most people are aware of it, and some people are behind it and some people are not. And definitely in the horse world, it's the same.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people who were very supportive and willing to talk, and then we had some people who were not. And that was a bit tough to take too, or people that just didn't think it had a place being discussed in the horse industry.
Yeah,
which absolutely. Was really hard to hear, for sure. And I think with what's been coming out in the news lately, like with Jimmy Williams, a trainer in the US who has since passed away, but there's all this stuff coming up about sexual assault and rape with his students. It's obviously something that needs to be talked about in our world.
Yeah. And you know, it sounds like, you know, when you were chatting with me beforehand, there's, you know, these very kind of like textbook arguments against it, against the Me Too movement, that, you know, come up for not only, I mean, we're not just talking men, but also like women, you know, sort of voicing their displeasure in this movement as well. You know,
Yeah.
what did you see there? Like what, and where do you think that's coming from in terms of this particular industry?
I think what shocked me the most was that of all the negative comments and messages we got, it was 90% from women.
Hmm.
And I thought, this is your fight. Like, this is not, you're not outside of this. And a lot of it was, oh, the movement has been so bastardized and it's gotten away from what it should be about. And a lot of people were concerned about false accusations, which I think if that's what you're focusing on, you just aren't getting the full picture. Of course, that's something that happens, but if we can get people to come forward and talk about what's happened to them and go through the right chain of action when that kind of stuff occurs, I think that's a great thing. And of course, yeah, sure, there'll be maybe the few cases where there are false accusations, but if that's the focus, you're looking at the wrong side of the picture for sure. And
Mm.
then of course there was a lot of people who were like, keep this out of the horse world and it has no place here. And I mean, I just think it's something that, sure, it started in Hollywood, but it's trickled out to other industries and just the whole world in general, really. I mean, it's not just Hollywood at all. And definitely, I think it is something that the horse industry needs to be talking about and creating safer places for people, especially for young women. And not to say that it doesn't happen to men and boys as well, but of course, that's predominantly what you hear about, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it was a bit hard to get that, be on the receiving end of that. There was a lot of like hate and just anger, and
Mhm.
we were just trying to open up a discussion. So on the other side of that coin, though, there was a lot of people who messaged us and said, thank you for talking about this. I have a story, and a lot of really brave women that were willing to be interviewed by us and by our writer. And I think that was really commendable. And definitely the negative feedback that we got, can't overshadow that kind of stuff.
So
And
positive.
we have had some, yeah, like I think it, do you try to tend to focus on the negative stuff, but then you have to think about all of the positive things that came out of it as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like really opening up this opportunity for, you know, people to have a voice around this, you
yes,
know,
definitely.
specifically in
Yeah,
an industry that, you know, as me and April were talking about earlier, there does tend to be this particular conditioning and a very much like a hierarchy in certain parts of
yes,
the industry that set themselves up in a way for this potential, you know, for people to be harmed or,
definitely.
you know, abused in some way or harassed, and
Yeah,
you know, to take that, just as the, you know, we saw with this trainer that April posted about the other day, you know, that there was a very much a power structure there,
yeah,
where
yeah.
people revered him as like a god, you
Totally,
know, and so
totally godlike.
he got away with immense amounts of harm.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
even you know, like April said, just shocking because, you know, in many cases the parents even knew what was going on. It was
yes,
very
yeah,
insidious. There was many people that were sort of complicit in the harm that was being done to these children, really. And
yeah,
uh, you know, it's to start to kind of, you know, it can be tricky, and I'm sure you're finding this, April, to expose the underbelly of something, to really look at the shadow of something,
definitely.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
You know, because that's when the, you know, people, the defenses come up, and you know.
exactly. Yeah, and it's
Mhm.
not to take away from the industry or any of the good people out there or people's good experiences, but we do need to talk about what's happening and to maybe hopefully make changes for the future for everybody. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's not going to change on its own. So having those difficult discussions and trying to change people's minds if maybe they're don't understand the topic or the movement or anything.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah. And when you reached out to, I know the woman who wrote the article, and you also did a survey on horse journals, what did you find? Did you
yeah,
find that there was lots of, many people that were impacted in this way that did
yeah,
say Me Too?
yes. I think like we probably had, I would say like half a dozen people that came forward that were willing to talk.
Yeah.
Might have been more than that, all across North America. And I'm sure there was many more. I was actually a little bit surprised because you have a fairly large reach that there wasn't
Mhm.
more, but I think that just goes to show how unwilling some people are to talk about things. It takes a lot of bravery and trust, I guess, in who you're speaking to be able to come forward and say something. One of the women that we did interview was actually in the process of, they'd gone through court and
Mm,
trial with the person that she had accused, and so that was really interesting to see because that's something that doesn't always get to that stage. But of course it was a bit disappointing because you never feel like it's enough for what has happened and what that person has done.
yeah.
I think that's a, I mean, this is a whole nother topic, but when we talk about like justice system and that kind of stuff,
Yes.
it's it's got some changes to do to make it
Yeah.
more fair for the victims, I think.
Agreed.
But
Hmm.
I think this is all part of it, really, and taking steps in the right direction. And I mean, one of the biggest things is just getting people to come forward, I think, and feeling like there's a safe place for them to do so. Because I think that's the problem is when they see all this negative comments, and of course, like social media, it's so amazing and terrible all at the same time because people just hide behind their keyboards. But if there's somebody
Hmm.
who has had an experience, maybe they've been assaulted or raped, or and they see all these negative comments and these horrible people saying horrible things, that's not going to encourage them to come forward. And so,
No.
it's kind of this double-edged sword. Here's this great platform that we're using to talk about the movement and to talk about what's happening in our world and how we can change it. But then on the other side of the coin, you've got these people who, I mean, you could call them trolls and who are saying and doing these horrible things and are just not helping. But
Yeah.
I think it's stronger than that. So
I think so
I
too.
hope it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the wave is getting bigger. And I
Yes.
mean, not
Yeah.
only that, not only these, sort of negative comments online, but, I'm sure you can speak to even being fearful of exposing, the
Yes.
abuser, or right,
Totally.
this sense of the vulnerability that
Yeah.
exists in just naming that and coming forward, and how
Definitely.
many people just never do that because it is so terrifying to.
Oh, completely. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to say. Like even for me, I made a very small contribution to the article and I wrote a couple paragraphs, and what happened to me was outside of the horse world, but of course I've been involved in the horse industry forever
Yeah.
essentially. And I've been on the receiving end of discrimination and harassment, and I've been pretty lucky. I've been somewhat unscathed in that sense, but even for me in the article to say yes, I'm a survivor of sexual assault,
Hmm.
it's terrifying, right? Because you
Yes.
worry that people will judge you, or it might change their opinion of you. And the thing is, it has nothing to do with you at all. I
Mhm.
mean, it was something that happened to me, but it's not me, right?
Yeah.
But that's really easy for me to say now, you know,
Yeah.
25 years after it happened and lots of therapy. And it's like the landscape is totally changing because before it wasn't something that you talked about. And now it's, I think, with everything that's going on, it's just getting less and less taboo. And I think that's what's
Yeah.
really important to sort of shine some light on what's been hiding in the shadows, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah.
does. And what do you notice? I mean, like, after sharing that paragraph about yourself and what went on for you, like, how did that feel? Was that
It
a
was
liberating experience? Was that,
totally, it was terrifying, especially
yeah,
to see it in print. And then once I actually had the magazine in my hand and I read it, I was like, this is good. Like, and I'd actually wish that I had done more.
Yeah.
But I still can, right? There's
Yeah,
all sorts of
absolutely.
opportunities out there, right? So no, it was very liberating, and it kind of takes something that you've held for a really long time, and you kind of let go of it, right? And put it
Yeah.
out there and talk about it. And I mean,
Mm,
talking about this kind of stuff is very cathartic, and
yeah.
it's very helpful for sure. And I hope that more people can find that for themselves and their own individual experiences. And
Absolutely. And not only that, it's like then when it's spoken, it's
yeah,
like we also have the, we step up the level of accountability, right?
yes, yeah,
So for these perpetrators, it
yes,
becomes hopefully
a deterrent.
a deterrent
Yeah,
and less of an opportunity. When we stay silent,
yeah,
it's like the perfect predator grounds, for
completely. Yeah,
someone because there's, they can get away with anything and nobody's
yeah, yeah,
necessarily going to speak up about it. So,
exactly.
and with this movement, I think what was so profound is the sheer numbers of
Yeah,
women,
I know.
particularly, men and women, but specifically women that came forward. And we look at an industry like the
Yes,
horse industry.
yeah,
The reality is, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are. You would probably know better than me, but
yeah.
the number of women is way up there.
Well, I know, like when I was in high school, which come on, that was a really long time ago. It was 1 in 3
Yeah.
women, and I'm pretty sure it
Hi.
definitely hasn't changed. If anything, it's gone up. And so
Yes.
that's something. Um, in the article, there was a stat, and unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me, and I can't remember exactly, but it's the one crime in Canada that has not gone down over the years. So that's something that we need to change as far as
Absolute. Yeah. No.
making it a safer place for everybody. Um, and I think talking about it it's a good start.
Yeah.
So
uh, That's for sure. And I'm really grateful that you're willing to open up around it. And
yeah,
that we're continuing to have the conversation and
exactly. Yeah,
I'm sure I would guess that there's little wheels turning around possible future, speaking to this more, especially.
yeah. Oh, definitely. It's one thing because of course I'm quite vocal about it on Facebook and social media and
Mhm.
among my friends, and I've had some negative experiences, and I thought, cool, well, I'm just going to keep talking about it. So
Yeah,
if you don't want to hear about it, that's fine, but I'm not going to stop. So I think that hopefully something that most people can find is that tenacity to just keep pushing forward and shining light on things and I don't know, just trying to make a step in the right direction, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And we talked a little bit earlier around this idea about being conditioned
Yes.
to by our culture, conditioned to stay quiet,
Be under
conditioned
control.
to grin and bear it,
Yes. Yeah.
just tough it out,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
all these
Um,
things.
I mentioned briefly when we spoke earlier about the experience I had at a trade show, a horse-related trade show, where one of the vendors was wildly inappropriate with me, and I smiled and I nodded and I laughed, and then I avoided him like the plague for the rest of the weekend.
Mhm.
And more than that exchange with him, it bothered me that I didn't say anything and I didn't
Mhm.
say, no, this is not okay. But I think that just speaks to what you just mentioned is that we're kind of conditioned to just smile and laugh and, even
Don't
when
rock
we're
the boat. Don't rock
yeah,
the
don't rock
boat.
the boat. Don't, don't be a bitch and, but
Yeah.
it bothered me and this was months ago and it still bothers me to my core that I didn't say something because I'm not don't think of myself as a weak person. You know, I'm
Mm.
pretty outspoken, but I just was so shocked and uncomfortable with what he was talking about that I just didn't do anything. And it's really stuck with me, but I do think that that's part of the problem is the, you know, be a good girl, like you don't want to be looked at as being a difficult person, or
Right.
there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with saying what you're saying or what you're doing is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a good reminder for everybody.
Absolutely. And you know, if I'm sure you've gone back over that scenario a few times in your
Oh,
head.
a million times.
So if you were back there, you know,
Yeah.
with said somewhat creepy dude,
Yeah.
what, you know, what do you think what would have felt really good to do?
You know, I think what needed to happen was the moment he made an inappropriate comment, I needed to say, no, that's not
Right.
okay. And as soon as I let that slide, it just escalated more and more and more. And then it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I just need to leave because I'm so uncomfortable with this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like I think it's one of those things that people only treat you how you let them. So, you know, even if it was just this casual encounter at a trade show, if I had said, no, you can't talk to me like that, he probably would have fallen off his chair. Like, I don't think he was, you know, he's obviously used to getting away with that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And certainly I don't think anything bad would have happened. I don't know why that stopped me, but yeah, I just wish that right away at that first inappropriate comment, I had said, no,
Yeah.
that's I refuse to be spoken to like that. So
And I think, you know, I can speak to this as a woman.
yeah.
Um, saying no is very hard.
Oh, completely.
It's
It's something I
so,
struggle with. Really.
so
Yeah,
hard, you know, and
definitely.
especially to a man. Um,
Yes.
you know, and so like, you know, bringing gentleness to yourself around that. And I think
Yeah.
for many of us, it's something that we look back over experiences and go, oh
Yes.
gosh, I wish that I had been able to like find my voice in that moment and
Exactly. Yeah.
speak that no. And yet because and it's no wonder, I mean, the amount of fear, like I've tracked this back in some of my, you know, I do this incredible work with a dear friend of mine called it's called interpersonal body psychotherapy, IBP.
Yeah.
And I found it fascinating. So we did an exercise together on no and saying
Oh
no.
wow. Yeah.
And I was like, like I'm like, and you know me,
Yeah.
I've got pretty good boundaries for the most part. Like
Totally.
us horse
Yeah.
girls, like we're like standing
Yeah. We're
down like
strong.
down, well, for you and me, like 1,300-pound animals every
Exactly.
day. And like you're not gonna be doing that, girl. You know, like
Yeah.
we have some, you know, oomph in
Yeah.
there. And I found it amazing because when I sat into my body sensations around this, and she gave me this exercise, she's like, okay, I want you to answer the same question twice. The first time
Yeah.
you say yes, the second time you say no. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And I just, you know, checked in. And she's like, all right. She asked me this question because she goes, Alexa, she's role playing. Alexa, like,
Yeah.
you know, I have this huge favor I need to ask of you. Nobody else can do this for me. Can you do this for me? Like, it would be amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes. And like, my whole body was elated. I was like, oh my God. Oh, you know?
Totally.
And then she says the same thing, asks the
Yeah.
same question, and I have to say no. And I
Mm.
literally couldn't even choke it up. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a role play. It's not real.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
finally, I'm like, no, you
Yeah.
know? And then I literally start bawling, like
Yeah.
diaphragmatic sobbing for the next
Oh,
20
God.
minutes. Like I was a wreck, you know? And
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
thinking, what is this? What is
Yeah.
this? And
Yeah.
what I realized is that saying no can be tantamount to feeling like we're going to die,
you
Oh,
know,
completely.
because it can create conflict, which creates isolation, which can create abandonment, which can create rejection, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, it's so much easier just to appease and just go along with it and just like, oh, I'll just ride this terrible sexual harassment wave until I can leave this trade show and never see this person again. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
And so, I mean, we talked a little bit about courage, but, you know, I think it's that, but it's also just recognizing, like, my guess is if you check back into your body sensations at that trade show, you were just shaking.
Oh, completely.
Right?
Completely.
Like your nervous system, the fear response, like just that sense of this person is not safe.
No, not at all. Yeah, not, and just so unexpected too. So I do think, you know, I have no problem saying no to my horse.
Me neither.
Like, we need to find that transition somewhere. There's a lot of power in being able to say, when it comes to your body or even just your own person, I will not accept this behavior, and that's okay. And I'm allowed to say no when it comes to that. And it's funny, it is something that's so hard. It is so hard.
I was astonished and how built into my system it was, how terrifying it was, you know. And so for all the women out there that are listening, like, know that saying no is not an easy thing, particularly in a situation where it feels like someone's either, you know, depending on you, or you might disappoint someone, or in April's case, she's at a trade show where she's working and she doesn't want to disappoint her, you know, potentially, you know, her employers at the trade show or other people that are around. There can be so many factors, right?
Definitely.
So, you know, we can go over all those things in our head, but I think what else has happened in the Me Too movement, and maybe the next phase, is this sense of calling up this voice inside of us. And like you say, going, this, you know, this is not going to be, this is not okay for me.
This is not okay. Yeah. And I'm entitled to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
My body and my being, and
for sure.
Yeah, it's shocking how hard that is.
And recognizing that by saying that, we are going against hundreds of years of patriarchy, everyone. Let's just name it.
100%.
You know, we have literally through our, you know, back through the generations of women been trained to be quite, you know, like good little girls who go along with it. And, you know, I think that might be a piece of what you're meeting up with, that resistance that you're meeting up with
definitely,
you know, your posts and things, right?
I think, I mean, I don't know many people who enjoy conflict, but I know for me personally, I would bend over backwards to avoid conflict. But sometimes you have to, like, sometimes it's just inevitable, and especially you kind of have to look after yourself a little bit out there. So
I guess in this here world, for sure,
definitely,
you know, and yet that's a skill that we're all building, you know, we're all growing at this point. We may not have even begun growing, you know.
I know. Well, it's way easier to look after other people or horses or dogs, like the one on my lap right now.
Right. I was wondering if in your lap, I think.
Yeah. Kudos is taking in. He's listening to every word.
Oh, good boy.
A gentleman from now on. But yeah, it's funny how hard it is to look after yourself. You know, for some people, and I think for women especially, it's really easy to look after everybody else and dogs and horses, but we have to look after ourselves and our fellow women too.
And our fellow women, we got to come together, you know, and we do see that in the horse industry. I mean, not in all parts, but there are these pockets where we actually see women almost like infighting a little bit, and
yes,
you know,
definitely.
that's a you know, could be a little bit of a tricky dynamic, because
For sure.
with this sort of thing, feeling safe and supported is important. We're working with traumatic territory, right? Like past traumas and things that are, so that sense of, am I safe, is really critical in bringing this forward, which is why I don't know what the numbers are, but there's, you know, probably just as many women who haven't come forward and said anything that have experienced
definitely,
you know, abuse.
I wish I had them on hand as far as the unreported assaults, but the numbers are staggering.
Yes.
And then as far as people who don't actually go to the authorities too, because that's the big thing as well.
I would say it's a tiny percentage that actually goes to the authorities. If you know,
and then even smaller is actually getting charges laid and that kind of stuff. It's sad, and I think that we kind of touched on this earlier, but hopefully with a change in that will be more of a deterrent for the predators and the terrible people to stop that kind of behavior. And I mean, we've got to do something. So
we do, and I think talking about it is a great first step, you know, looking into the shadows, and you know, that for me, this is my work, right? Like, this is what I you know, this is what I do, is literally, like, you know, I'm like the girl that's like, you know, picking up the rocks on the beach and going, what's under here, you know, and looking in the closets and going, what skeletons are in here? So, you know, I've gotten quite used to shadow work over that amount of time, but for many people, you know, they're quite happy, you know, going along with, okay, like, my life looks rosy, everything's fine, I'm not gonna look over there, there.
Firmly closed.
Yes. Lock on that, you know. And it can be very, very scary to feel like something that, you know, you've done such a good job protecting is becoming potentially exposed. But as you said, April, like, how freeing as well.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And you know, I've never talked about it and not felt better afterwards. You know, like, it's, I can't, you know, even when I was a kid and it was really scary, especially, you know, as a young adult and talking about it when it came to relationships and stuff like that. I'm lucky enough to say that I've never had a negative experience, and really just being open about it and open about my past has only helped me. Trying to hide it and not talk about it and not deal with the feelings around it is I will tell you, not helpful.
I can imagine. And I'm sure there's bigger pieces at play there too, right? For how that impacts you.
Yeah, I mean, childhood trauma definitely, it impacts are many and also long lasting too. But I think now at my age, I'm finally at a place where I feel pretty good about it. I feel like I'm in a good place where I can talk about it and hopefully help other people. I'd like to be able to do more. Maybe I need to look into see what that is. But yeah, I just hope that, you know, that trickle down effect from what all started in Hollywood and is now making its way through the horse industry just really encourages some positive change. And I hope that anyone listening, you know, anything that we've talked about can help in any shape or form, even if it's just that courage to talk yourself about anything that's happened or any experiences you've had. And
completely. Yeah. And, you know, we had chatted about this idea that I know when the Me Too movement first happened, and, you know, on Facebook, there was just all these posts, right? I remember posting something. I was like, well, I was like relatively unscathed by this, and da da da.
Yeah.
And it was.
I remember that.
You remember that post?
I do. I remember that exact post. Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like, I learned so much just in that post because of the comments that came up and people being like, wow, like, really? You know?
Yeah.
And I started thinking about it, and then there was one woman, I can't remember what one woman said, and I said something flippant like, you know, oh, I was a tomboy, and so I, you know, avoided, you know, untoward advances. And this woman like called me out, and I was like, that has nothing to do with this. And I'm like, wow, I am uneducated. Like I am lacking in really like understanding around all of this. And, you know, I'm like literally blaming the victim as a woman, you know, in a very like nuanced way, but yes, you know, I'm saying
it's really good of you to recognize that, because I wouldn't go that far, but there is a lot of that out there too.
Absolutely, because I was saying, oh, because of my looks and my appearance, nobody was interested in me in that way. And it's like, that has nothing to do with it. Like, someone could look any way and still be susceptible.
And still
the cultural, you know, this is a systemic cultural issue. That has nothing to do with that. And it was actually amazing to be called out on that. And I was like, thank you. Okay. The other thing that I realized about that whole post was, as I started to think about it, it's like all these experiences started to trickle to the surface. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, how about that one time that this happened? And how about that one time I was like, you know, put in this like really precarious and dangerous sexual, you know, sexually involved situation, where my health was put in danger. How about this situation where this, like, I really recognized after that people were kind of calling me out. Are you sure that, you know, you're 38 years old? Like,
well, I think a lot of people think that it needs to be rape or it needs to be really bad for it to be. But no, it doesn't. I mean, we're talking about sexual harassment, sexual assault. You know, there's varying degrees of it. It's all bad. It's not a competition. And just because something terrible didn't happen to you doesn't mean that something bad didn't happen to you, you know?
And I think the profound piece of it for me was, or one of them, was the normalization.
Yeah.
Like, and for me, it was
like,
normal.
This is a bad date.
Right? It was a bad date. It was, you know, oops, I got involved with a sociopath. Oops, you know, like, it was that. It wasn't, oh my gosh, I've actually like been like harmed on different levels in these ways. And not even being able to name it. Just been like, that's just what happens, isn't it? You know?
No, it's life experience. But no, it's not, and it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be moving forward.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the normalcy of it is just what's a bit scary.
Oh, it was shocking. It was shocking. Yeah. And once I owned that, I was like, okay, pretty much everyone has something.
Yeah.
Something.
Something, go
on,
exactly.
You know, and that this is like, I don't even, like, an epidemic of an issue. It's massive, and it's and you know, and I can't help but think that the horse industry is similar in that regard. You know,
definitely
in different ways. I mean, I know I was not sexually traumatized, but traumatized by my first riding instructor. You know, who screamed at me constantly. I mean, I still have her voice in my head. And, you know, I look back and I, you know, I usually talk about it and laugh about it, but I'm also thinking, like, that was
wait a minute,
awful. Like,
this was, definitely.
You know, yeah, there's so many levels and layers to that, right? And
For sure.
yeah, I mean, we could unpack that for a long time, even in terms of how it impacts our horses down the line.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
non-speaking, non-verbal beings that are kind of at the end of
Yeah. And
um,
so sensitive.
it's so sensitive, and also like impacted by the anger and the hurt that we carry
Yeah,
from
definitely.
unprocessed experiences, potentially of like, you know, a sexual nature, you know,
Yeah.
abuse or harassment, but also otherwise, right? So
Yeah.
I think that by addressing these, you know, parts of ourselves and
Mhm.
seeing them and witnessing them and holding the space for others and their healing, that we actually in so many ways positively impact our horses,
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
think they're such mirrors of us. So really anything that we do to better ourselves and our mind frame and, is good for them too.
mhm, for sure. Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's so great to, you know, have these conversations, and for people that are out there right now,
Yeah,
you know, knowing that you know, we're in this together, you know. We're
we are definitely. And I think we need to keep that mindset to keep moving forward. And I think too, with the Me Too movement, it risks of losing steam a little bit, or people get a bit inundated and sick of hearing about it. But that's when we need to keep talking about it, because we're
yeah.
not done yet at all. I think there's still a lot to come, and I think hopefully a lot of positive change. And I think that all starts with us all talking about it. And
Yeah, letting it ripple out, and even,
yes,
you know, hopefully rippling out to trade shows all across
yeah,
Canada. And
yes,
you know.
definitely. I have in my mind many times written a letter to that company. Maybe one day I will just send that letter
I think
and
that would be amazing, you
talk
know.
about my experience and why I never did buy the product I was going to buy because of their creepy salesman. So,
Yes. Yeah, and giving them some positive, you know, some
yeah,
like, you know, like here's some feedback. Maybe these are some things that you could do, right?
yeah.
And you know how, you know, like you said before, he may have been totally shocked that you even said anything,
Oh, completely. But
right?
yeah, had to know that that was not appropriate. But
In my imaginings, that's not the first time he's been
yes,
crazy.
definitely. And I think that's the thing, is so many of us were probably like, okay, just smile and nod. And so they take that as, oh, okay, well, this is acceptable behavior.
Yep.
Well, just continue doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually do. I do regret not saying something, and I will send that letter.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. That would
See,
be
that's part
awesome.
of the change, right?
That's
Is
part of the change. It really
yeah,
is. And
doing something scary.
yeah, yeah, no matter what happens, you've said your piece,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It would
Mm-hmm.
make me feel better, because I mean, God, it was months ago and it still bothers me. So I need to
Mm-hmm.
do something about it.
Yeah. And I remember someone saying that, you know, for a long time we lived, you know, we lived in villages and little, you know, groups of people. And so there was this ability to, you know, keep people accountable to their actions, you
Yeah,
know, and keep people
yeah,
really grounded in what was like, you know, how to live from the heart and without doing harm. And because now we live in these, you know, quite diffuse communities often, you know, often in cities where, you know what I mean? Like everybody's
oh yeah,
everywhere. You know, the chances of even running into someone are, you know, very
there,
minute.
yeah,
It's so difficult to, you know, hold that level of accountability. And yet it's in our communities that we do that. Like here, you know, in our horse community, that
yeah,
we are, you know, we actually have the ability to um, take care of each other
yeah, yeah,
if we
yeah,
speak up, you know?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do just that. It might be a little late, but I'm going to do just that.
I think it's perfect timing, and I think it'll help you to feel better too.
Definitely.
Awesome.
That's my
So,
homework.
yay, good. So in coming to the end of our time together, but I really want to, any last words here, any recommendations or like words of wisdom that you'd like to give to the people that are listening
I don't
today?
know if I'm qualified to give words of wisdom. I mean, if anyone's interested, I guess I can send you the link to the
Yeah.
magazine that has an article. I'd love for people to read it. I'd love to get feedback on it. There was resources in the article as well that were very well researched as far as anybody dealing with sexual assault or any sort of like mental health issues surrounding that. I think any words of wisdom are just to keep talking about things and to keep people accountable for the way that they treat you and the way that they treat other people too, because I think that's one thing that we kind of do turn a blind eye to.
Mm-hmm.
Is, whether it's of a sexual nature or just bullying in general or anything, we can help other people out there in the industry, and even if it's just by modifying our own behavior or letting people around us know that what they're doing and saying is not okay. And
Yeah.
I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but we got to look after each other. So let's try to keep doing that, because I think I want the horse industry to survive and thrive and be a safe place for everybody. So yeah, those are my parting words.
I love that. Those are total words of wisdom. Absolutely. Yes, maybe we create a horse industry and a world that is a safe place to live in for every person in it.
Exactly.
And eventually, and hopefully every horse as well. That would be
like
the ideal goal right there. Yeah.
Safe and happy people and horses. That's all we want.
Yeah, for sure. So any particular resources that you really loved in your journey, or, any recommendation books or websites, or
what has been the biggest thing for me is, and this is so cliche, but horses, even when I was a kid, like getting to go riding was such a sanctuary for me, and it still is. And whether it is riding or just being around them, and I'm sure you can relate, and so many people in the world can relate, that there's just something about being around a horse that's good for your soul. And I know for me, as somebody who trains and competes, sometimes I forget that I need to just slow down and just be with my horse. And, talking about this tonight, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go sit in her stall for a while or sit in the field with her and just be. And I find that probably one of the most beneficial things for me from the time I was a kid until now, and probably for the rest of my life. I'll always be a crazy horse person.
You and me both, girl.
Yeah. Like I've had a few great books and resources and stuff like that, but definitely it's horses for sure. So
wonderful. And I mean, gosh, you don't get more like pure than that, know? Yeah. I, as one totally horse obsessed person to another, I get it. It is in our blood.
100%.
There ain't nothing that we can do about it, and I'm sure many of you out there can relate to that statement. Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on today, April. I know this is a vulnerable topic, and it can feel a little heavy at times.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I also want to shout out to all the people that have listened to this podcast, and kind of just really like stuck with us till here. We appreciate it. This is the way that we start to change things, is by having some of those challenging conversations that don't always feel the easiest when we're first having them, but when they get out in the open, like April said, it just starts to feel better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for giving my voice a voice tonight.
Yay, you are welcome. Anytime, girl. Anytime.
Excellent.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We're going to just let you go for this evening. We'll be back soon. And me and April are wishing you a wonderful evening. Bye for now.